And Coach, let's kind of go back because I'm curious just out of regards to, you got the job at Notre Dame. It's a huge process. We heard all about Coach Kelly going through his time there. Talk about the hiring process at Notre Dame, how you were presented with the job, and how you ended up being contacted for the position.
Well, Notre Dame, man, we've never talked much about this, but I think I can now because Father Joyce has passed away. But I was at the University of Minnesota when Notre Dame contacted me, and Gene Corrigan came up to visit me, and he said, we want to do everything we can to help Jerry Faust succeed. We love the man. We want to do everything he can. But in the event that he does leave eventually, we don't like to pick out the coach at the last minute. So we wanted to visit with different coaches around the country, and a couple of questions we want you to understand. That there are certain things at Notre Dame are not negotiable. And I said, what are they? And he said, well, we don't take transfers. We don't redshirt. We don't have an athletic dorm. We don't have good facilities, and we don't plan on improving because we don't want to get in the arms race like everybody else. We got a bigger weight room. We want them to come to Notre Dame because they want to be part of our family. We're going to play the most difficult schedule we can find, and they lived up to that, I will say. And we expect to be competitive for a national championship. And he said the other thing is not negotiable. He said we have a policy that the head football coach was not allowed to make more than the president of Notre Dame. And then I found out the president of Notre Dame was a priest that took the vow of poverty. Now he said, we're bringing these things because these things are not negotiable. If you were to end up at Notre Dame, we don't want you to come there thinking, well, we'll change this or that. He said, no, we're talking to different coaches. He said, this is nothing about you coming to Notre Dame. All we want to do is find out who would be interested in Notre Dame with understanding these parameters. And he didn't say anything that would keep us from winning. He didn't say you could only play with 8 and everybody else has 11. What he did say, there's going to be problems, there's going to be difficulties in anything you do. And I said, no, those don't present a problem to me. And he said, once again, we want to do everything we can to help Jerry Faust win. We love the man. Well, when Notre Dame ended up making a change and did not renew Jerry Faust, then Father Joyce called, and he said, we have decided that you're the man we'd like to have lead Notre Dame. Do you understand the things that we aren't going to change, academics, et cetera? And I said, yes, and he said, with that, we'd like you to be the head coach. See, what they did, I didn't realize this, but they had the head coach picked out before the other one left, so that there isn't all this everybody getting in, ought to be this guy, that guy, and then you go to a coach and say, you interested in Notre Dame? Well, if he hadn't been contacted by Notre Dame, he's going to say no because it hurts his school, and if he doesn't get the job, and so I said, Father, I really want to be at Notre Dame, but I've got to check with my family. My youngest son was a diabetic. He was a freshman in Minnesota. I had a daughter who was junior in high school. And here's the irony. I go back home to talk to my wife. I said, I'll call you in the morning, Father. I want to do it, but my family's my first obligation. So I go home. We talked about decide I could go to Notre Dame. Kevin would be all right. The phone rings. I was offered a job at Southern Cal the same night.
Oh,
the next morning I called Father Joyce and said, yes, and he said, great. He said, we're playing Miami. We'll do the press conference next Monday, the announcement. I said, fine. He called me back a little bit later that day. He said, no, there's too many people deciding who should be the coach. He said, we want to put an end to it. Notre Dame leaves for Miami at 11 in the morning on Wednesday of Thanksgiving. He said, we'll have the press conference at 1 o'clock. And that's how I ended up at Notre Dame.
That's an amazing story. I'm a younger kid, and I'd never really heard the details of that because it was
I have never shared those before, but that's exactly the way it happened. And the whole thing about they wanted Jerry Faust to succeed, but they had foresight of saying, okay, and I didn't know. They said they're talking to many coaches just to find out who would be a possible candidate before that happened. And I didn't know. Maybe they talked to 20 other people. I don't know, but that's exactly how I ended up at Notre Dame.